Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. And we have got the latest news, roughly speaking. It's a little bit blurry right now to me, but I can basically tell you the RMT, the union people are causing shenanigans again. They're going to protest every weekend. Why don't you just quit your job like everybody in America has done, or they won't return to work after the pandemic? I swear to you, drive through the Midwest, you see signs at like fast food restaurants saying, we will give you $1,000 signing bonus to come work here for a few months. Anyway, sorry, I'll get back to the point. Unions are up to no good at the RMT. The RMT is the union. The TFL is the sort of subway system in England. You guys know that, obviously. Let's talk about unions more broadly speaking and the sort of philosophy, the sort of way to approach it fundamentally. And I've got a guy here who I now realize he must be part of an actors union, which actually means we owe him a lot of food breaks, snacks, dental coverage. We are in trouble. So please super chat us immediately. It is Mark Pellegrino.
What's up, Rucka?
What's up? So I guess how do you tend to think about unions? That's kind of a broad question. Or what do you think about the advent of unions in the first place?
Well, from what I know about the advent of the unions, it's a shady history. It's a messy business. The unions originally were a movement that were populated by people who were collectivists, socialists, and they were attempting to push those values onto society through the consolidation of labor and through grievances with labor, I think. So it's a mixed bag, even though there are probably some grievances that were in the labor movement that were legitimate. As far as I'm concerned, I am for any association, voluntary association of people, but that's not the way the unions have turned out. They have extraordinary political power. They are exempt from monopoly law, so they can, in essence, form labor monopolies and not be subject to antitrust laws like other businesses are. And businesses are compelled to deal with them. And that gives them inordinate political power. It's unfair and it shouldn't be there. For my part, I'm forced to be in a union. I'm forced to be in SAG. I could declare what they call financial core and be independent of the union. I don't know if that means that I lose all the benefits that I've worked 30 years to acquire. I'm also subjected to sliding scale dues and no additional benefits from those sliding scales. So somebody who doesn't work and is nonetheless maintaining their union membership with a minimum union fee has the same vote as I do, even though I pay several times more than they do, at least $5,000 or $6,000 a year in union dues, some of which goes to leftist political causes that I don't agree with at all.
Now, when you say you're forced to be in a union, what do you mean?
It means I have to be in it to work. Unions are closed shops, and you have to, if you are outside of the union and working in a show that requires union membership, which most do, if you want to make any money, they have to either waive you into the union, or you have to sign papers that the union gives you permission to work inside that inside that project. When the labor union creates a labor cartel, they shut out all labor. They shut out free labor. You can't work on that project unless you get permission from the union to do so.
It's virtually impossible to work as an actor unless you're in the union, but
I think so. Right.
Or at least higher than like very small time jobs, like extra work or like small projects. But I just want to clarify, it's not the government that's forcing this to be the case. It's the union itself and people that like the union and agree with it that have created this system. Is that correct? It's not the government.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think that is true. I'm not exactly clear on that, but the government certainly gives the union inordinate negotiating power.
Okay, yeah. Due to the lobby system we have, people think, oh, big business controls the government. Well, big businesses have a lobby, and the unions have a lobby, and other unions and the welfare recipients have a lobby, and there's various lobbies that, offer their vote in exchange for promises from
Right, and
politicians.
let's also say that even though unions have a reputation for being for the little guy and being the organization that gives the little guy more clout than he has, there's directors guild unions, there's writers guild unions, and producers guild unions, all of whom negotiate contracts before the actors. We're the lowest one on the totem pole, and the directors and producers guild are composed of extremely wealthy people. And one union strike I remember a few years back, maybe a decade ago in California, was a longshoreman strike. I don't know if you were here or remember that strike that happened in California. The average salary of a longshoreman is 6 figures. They negotiated a settlement where the strike was over new technology that was coming in that was enabling transport companies to lay off longshoremen, because it was making the transportation and transfer of goods from one place to another extremely cheap because it was becoming automated. Well, these longshoremen lobbied for and got the preservation of jobs that were no longer necessary. So somewhere there's a longshoreman sitting there making 6 figures a year doing nothing.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of unions, obviously. Now, the one that you're a part of and highly pressured to be a part of and could arguably not be able to do your job without being a part of is relatively voluntary. I say relatively because there are industries, I think relating to, in the Rust Belt, as it's called, like Michigan, where did you guys shoot? Pennsylvania, all these, a lot of factory type work, where like you legally must be part of a union to work there. And a controversial bill that would come up would say, like, they'd call it the right to work, where like you literally, the law would permit you to voluntarily take a job without being part of the union, and other workers would violently resist it. Like you would see this. I mean, in Michigan, where I was living at the time, people were ready to kick each other's asses over this right to work bill that would, all it would really do is lift up a law that requires you to be part of a union. So it would say, if you want to work and someone wants to hire you, you are free to do that voluntarily. But other people resisted that. They said, no, this is going to make our labor less valuable, obviously, because we are in the union. And just like with immigration, they want the law to protect their job and protect them from competition. So some unions are far more ingrained in the law than even yours might be, obviously, right? Like, but even without the government forcing you to be in a union, once the union like has a hold of an industry, obviously, as you're describing, it's very difficult and it becomes very corrupt. Now, once upon a
it has a sordid past. It's not just that and earlier I alluded to socialists being heads of union and trying to push a certain social agenda and political agenda into the world through the unions, but there's also a more insidious motivation behind unions that people don't really know about, and that is the discrimination and racist elements behind unions. When the Great Migration was happening, African Americans moving north, escaping Jim Crow and the onerous discrimination that was going on in the South, they began to take jobs from quote unquote white folks in the North, and this was an unacceptable condition for these white folks who wanted to have a monopoly. They didn't want to have that kind of competition, and so union laws were passed to keep out foreigners and African Americans who were competing for the labor. So it has discriminatory elements to its roots that are really, really disgusting and anti-American.
Absolutely. So, I'm confident, and I think there's reason to be confident, that if laissez-faire capitalism had been intact in the early 20th century, all the attempts to keep blacks and immigrants out of the the job market would have failed. The market would have provided them all with jobs, and the voluntary unions could not have done anything about that. But, obviously capitalism would have provided such abundance.
Well, it did, though, in a way. I mean, we weren't unionized as to the extent that Europe was. Our salaries were much higher, and unionization never really took a hold in America. It took hold in certain sectors, but I think at its height, it was somewhere under 30% of the population when it was unionized, and now it's in the neighborhood of 7%, and a lot of those are public sector unions, and that's why the public sector is breaking the back of the private sector right now.
And it's a whole new level of corrupt when government workers now have a union. And this is, I say now, but this has been the case for a long time. But like, it's one, private sector people, they want to collectively bargain. It gets very shady at times, but there's still some semblance of reasonableness to it. But for a bunch of government employees to now collectively bargain to their employer, which is the government. So the government is paying them with money that they taxed from other sectors, from other people, and now they're all bargaining together. I mean, and they have a union, and they're government employees. I mean, it's just next level.
That's even worse. That you're right. That's even worse because they're already living off of compelled money. It's not money that they've earned so much. It's money that they've taken, and now they're asking for more. Perhaps it's time for somebody of the stature of a president like Reagan to step in and put an end to the strike. Reagan did that with the air traffic controllers. He stepped in and I think fired them all and let new people come in and do the job so that the economy wouldn't be frozen. Perhaps it's time for the prime minister and or parliament to step in and do the same with these jackoffs.
Wow, I'm surprised airplanes weren't falling out of the sky like Breaking Bad, huh?
No, crazy, right?
Yeah. Now, I once took an acting class in Detroit, theater capital, and we had kind of like a rundown of like the industry on day one. The acting teacher told us about unions and, what, and kind of like, this is what you're going to need if you're going to get work. And someone asked, like, why are these unions even there if they're so inconvenient? And the acting teacher says, well, before there were unions, like it was just the Wild West. You'd have actual like people shooting real bullets at each other on set. Are you aware of this in the early days of Hollywood? You're kind of a Hollywood aficionado, right? Where the people literally, was it just like Alec Baldwin every day on movie sets? Sorry.
I know of. No, not that I know of.
Sounds pretty ridiculous. Sounds like quite the exaggeration, if not outright lie, to say that that's what was going on. But okay, I mean, once upon a time, I can contemplate that workers in one industry or many industries had reason to say, let's collectively bargain. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I still wonder if initial corruption caused them to feel that need to collectively bargain. There's an interview Ayn Rand did with one of her handful of interviews where she gave a very thoughtful take on unions. She said it was politicians and big local big businesses doing each other favors in the first place that gave the need for these unions to be created in the first place. That was maybe her take. Maybe she was informed by some economists that she was reading. Who knows if she was entirely right or not.
Well, but, I think from the beginning of the regulatory state, you do have an unholy mixture of big businesses attempting to monopolize their particular territories through the use of government power. Now, it was done in the interests of controlling prices, quote unquote. But these businessmen knew that they were trying to break competition, and this probably did create lots of scenarios where people were taken advantage of and exploited. Certainly in the railroads, that was the case. But I think that the formation of the labor movement itself was a combination of muckraking journalism and sensationalism from clearly socialist authors who despised capitalism and made up stories about the depredations of capitalism, like Upton Sinclair and his famous book, The Jungle, was was a seminal work to bringing in the meat and food and drug administration, and that muckraking and sensationalism coincided with this reformist spirit that was going on that we call progressivism, and it was a convenient spur to encourage political engagement with the private sector even more.
And so much of the corruption has been and is at the local level. So it's not like a lot of our libertarian friends think. It's like, just get the federal government to back off and let the states do what the states want to do. It's not, I mean, it's more localized than the states even. I mean, you cannot run a restaurant without having a bureaucrat breathe down your neck. You cannot have a big business and without, having friends in the city council or whatever it is. I mean, we need to seriously, fundamentally understand that property and government should not be intertwined. The government's job should only be to enforce the law, and the law should only be protecting rights properly. And I mean, there's a lot that can be said about the details of how that would look, but it is the lack of that clarity in the first place that brought about this corruption. And it has been at the local level as much as at any other level. Yeah, I guess we could read some super chats. We got Marilyn with $5, Jonathan Honig with $4.99, Jeff Bannister with $2 Regina with €2, Roland with €4.99 says, hope this buys a latte in Hollywood. Just barely. Marilyn with $5 says, unions are okay if totally separated from any government power and get rid of antitrust. Unions favor the stagnant, not the productive little guy. Marilyn again with $5 says, public sector unions have a huge conflict of interest. Yeah, and that's putting it lightly. They are a literal embodiment of conflict of interest. Allison with $5 says, does SAG help voice bad working conditions other than going towards the collectivists? It helps keep staff employed. I am curious about this.
I don't know. I mean, I was ripped off by a producer for a movie that I did. I told SAG about it and nothing happened. So it could be that SAG is just a weak union. Every once in a while, I see a union representative come on the set and ask us if everything is okay. And normally it is. There's nothing to complain about. But I think they do perform that service on occasion. They haven't helped me with residuals or getting producers that have ripped me off, though, which I think is pretty important.
Well, I'm not a union guy, but I probably am related to some lawyers. So let me get you in touch with some people. But yeah, so at the kind of starting level of acting, there's a lot of people look for work when they're not union, and there is this sort of thing I've heard of, which is like, if they want to cast you, but you're not union, they can like pay a fee because that's how badly they want you in this project. Are you familiar with that?
There's yes, that's how I got into the union. It's called Taft-Hartley. You get Taft-Hartley. So the project pays the union initiation fee, and then you become a member of the union.
Oh,
you start a temporary member of the union, and then you get into the union later on. Nowadays, they've loosened up the rules a bit, I think. So back when I started, it was you were between a rock and a hard place. You couldn't really work if you weren't in the union, but you couldn't be in the union unless you worked. So Taft-Hartley was sort of the way to get in. Now you can become an extra, and you get vouchers when you're working as an extra, and then you get enough vouchers. I think you turn them into the union, you get union status, and you start paying dues.
Okay. So like, hypothetically, if somebody like you who has a name and others like you decide we're done with the union, like we quit, we're still looking for work, but we're done with the union, wouldn't you still get hired, and they would basically pay off whoever needs to be paid off in order to make the project happen?
You have to declare financial core, I think, if you're a member of the union. So you can't just drop the union. You have to declare some status like financial core to be able to work, which gives you union status without being a member of the union and paying the dues. So there may, and I don't know anything about this, but there may be something within the law that requires you to be a union member or a quasi-union member through a certain status declaration. Because I was asked to do this recently. There are some conservatives now that are starting to produce their own content because I'm not a conservative hater like so many folks in Hollywood. They've asked me to be a part of their projects, but I would have had to declare financial core, and I don't think I'm independent enough to be able to do that financially. So I refused.
You can't walk away from like mainstream showbiz.
I can't walk. Yeah, I can't walk away from the pension I've earned, and which I think you may have to do, and the medical insurance that I pay into, and all that stuff.
Well, it is nice to know, I guess. Who was the Cabello, the Star Wars TV series girl who got fired from Disney? Regina, was it? I forget, but she
is Gina Carano.
That's right.
That's actually the project that I was asked to work on. It was her project that she's doing for the Daily Wire.
That's right. Well, I guess and I hope, I wouldn't wish this, but if you get Gina Carano at some point, at least you'll know you got Ben Shapiro and his people to fall back on. He is the Daily Wire.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, yeah, well, okay, I have an idea. Okay, how about this? All the SAG members, a bunch of them, get together and basically go on strike against SAG and tell SAG, here are our demands, and we're not going to work until you, SAG, start giving us what we want. You get the idea I'm getting at here?
Sure.
Marilyn with $2 says Whole Foods stores are non-union. Yeah, there are very successful. I think Amazon, I don't know if they have a union or not, but they're kind of known for being a little bit more on the Uber side of things. Like I could probably get a job at Amazon by the end of today if I want to.
Oh, that's right. I remember one of the jobs I had early in my life was working at Thrifty's drugstore, and as a stock person, a cashier, and working the ice cream counter, doing pretty much everything. And I had to join the union to get that job.
Wow. Enric with $4.99 says very small film productions don't require SAG actors, right?
Sure.
I mean, yeah.
Sure, but I think you have to file papers with SAG. So I've produced a couple of movies, and you have lots of paperwork to fill out with SAG, waivers, salaries for actors that are deferred payment. All of that stuff has to be worked out with SAG in advance. So that's in Paris and the various localities that we were filming in. The SAG still had some reach in those projects. So I don't know.
I mean, depends, what we mean by a film. Like me and my friends with a nice camera can go out and shoot a movie like we did over the summer. But, other than Amazon Prime, like where's anyone ever going to see it? Because Amazon Prime, actually, speaking of Amazon, they make it's almost like YouTube. Like it's a little bit more complex, like demanding process, but you can basically get your movie or show listed on there fairly easily, from what I understand. So we are moving in a direction where the average person can basically put their project out there and all that. But, if you want to be widely distributed and hire, big actors and have it produced and edited by industry standard people, I mean, the reality is you're going to need to have relationships, and you're going to need to have funding and all of that. So Allison with $5 says, get your royalties / residuals. You get what you deserve, and it's sad SAG doesn't back that. Sounds frustrating, Mark.
Yeah, they're frustrating, and they're the low union on the totem pole. So the rich guys get all the benefits, and by the time SAG negotiates a contract, they get nothing.
Now, I started this episode with a joke about how like we owe you dental coverage and snacks for the show, but have you thought about, like, at some point will SAG sort of and other things, other forces at play, like kind of catch up with the internet and basically say like, no, you cannot do a podcast on the internet unless SAG approves it?
It's certainly it may get there. I mean, there's the streaming world has created a potential bonanza of money that a greedy, despicable union would love to exploit if they could. Now, their members would like to exploit that too, because they don't think the residuals and the payment scales are are very good in some of those areas, and to some degree they're right, um, but yeah, SAG will probably like to squeeze into this world at some point.
And the government. I mean, I've definitely
Oh,
thought
sure.
about this. Eventually, when two YouTubers collaborate, a collab, let's say KSI and Logan Paul, let's say two big YouTubers, they make a video together and that gets 100 million views. That is big business right there. I mean, we're talking about millions upon millions of dollars. It's only a matter of time, in my estimation, before the government starts treating that like a merger, like, they start taking antitrust action against
Hey,
them.
by the way, speaking of YouTubers, Jake Paul just issued an ultimatum to Dana White. Did you see that?
Yes, he said, I'll show you mine if you show me yours, meaning my steroid test if you show me your
Oh,
clients. Is that what
no,
you mean? No?
no. I don't know that he did that. I know that he, this is the way YouTubers can change the world. I think Jake Paul is changing the face of boxing in a sort of a cool way. He said he will give up his boxing career. I think fight somebody. He said he would fight a UFC fighter like Masvidal. I think he said in the UFC for one fight if, and he sent out a set of demands that Dana White increased the salary for individual UFC fighters from 12,000, the minimum from 12,000 a fight to 50,000. I can't believe that some of these UFC fighters only making 12,000 for a fight camp and a fight. That he gives them health insurance and pensions and gives them a cut of the pie of the UFC pie, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion plus. And I thought those were all very cool recommendations, and it would soothe, I think, Dana White's hatred for Jake Paul because he's beating up some of these UFC guys in the boxing ring. I thought that was cool. I just wanted to say that because that's the private sector at work agitating for better working conditions for people. You don't necessarily need a union for that.
Yeah. Now, Jake Paul, in this clip that I saw, he was calling Dana a selfish, capitalistic, a-hole, whatever he called him. I mean, couldn't you then someday look back on this and say, yep, it was, anti-capitalistic forces at play that brought about this, workers' rights movement or whatever it was. Like, I mean, is this fundamentally different from a union?
Yeah, because it's just somebody exposing shenanigans of somebody else, and that person out of shame actually being a little bit more conscientious about how they distribute things within the company. I think Dana White's done great things for the UFC. I mean, he puts out fights that people really want to see, and I'm definitely willing to pay for more pay-per-view fights in UFC than boxing. I think he's taken over. He's dominated that. He's brought women into the field of the fight game now and made them credible, marquee value fights, and that's groundbreaking and historical. But I think the fight game is really tough, and it's harder for boxers because they have even less backing or notoriety in many cases than UFC fighters do. But I think he could definitely be a little bit more generous at this point.
Cool. Well, it's interesting to hear like a fighting / boxing fan of like yourself have a positive impression of Jake Paul. I know he's controversial, and a lot of people have perceived him as like disrespecting the sport and turning it into a joke. But
well, yeah, they do. They say that, but he skipped a lot of rungs, right? I mean, he's a great publicity guy, and he generates millions of dollars. And let's face it, even though Woodley got knocked out in the second fight, he made more money probably in that one fight than he did in his entire career in the UFC. So he's actually helping quite a few people, including exposing a little bit about the shenanigans behind the boxing world.
Yeah. Very nice. All right. So I guess jumping over to England real quick, they definitely have a culture of anti-business that makes Americans look very capitalistic by comparison. So they were like a literal socialist democracy for a long time. Probably in the 80s, they swung a little bit in the opposite direction, or a lot in the opposite direction. But the fact that British unions are going on strike now and planning to strike every weekend, and Razi's sending me these articles saying that the leader of that union is like a outright communist. I mean, there's like virtually no significant voice in England who could like make a moral argument for capitalism and against this type of BS. What they really need is a moral defense of capitalism. And until then, they're only going to see their lives disrupted by this type of thing.
I don't know what kind of powers Johnson has, but if he had cashews and was really a free market guy, which he clearly isn't, he would fire those people and replace them with others.
Yeah. And obviously, even better yet, privatize and make it none of his concern. But yeah, I think. All right. Bonnie with $5 says, if you have to join a union to work somewhere, whose call is that? The union or employer? To what degree is government involved? I'm not sure how it works. Bonnie, are you asking like in currently or ideally? But Mark, do you know what
I don't know. I don't know how it works. You know, there in American Rust, there is a union storyline where my wife works in the garment business, and you know, is getting arthritis and not able to pay her bills because she makes so little, and she's attempting to unionize the shop. Now, I guess it starts out voluntary, you know, where you get a certain percentage of workers to vote to be a union shop. And once it becomes a union shop, I think it's subject to all of the laws that govern unions, which, you know, hobble the employer's right to association for the most part. So, you know, that's definitely an interesting legal question. I'm not sure how these unions come about in the supermarkets that you go to and drugstores. Those unions are there and you have to join them to work.
All right. Well, I guess those are all the super chats we have. I think we're ready for some announcements. At 8 p.m. UK time, it's the premiere of Reverse Engineering Happiness with Tal Tzfani and Amanda Maxim. Now that I want to see. Then at 9 p.m. UK time, it's HBTV. That's Harry Binswanger TV. Free Will, writ large and writ small. Did I pronounce writ correct? WRIT?
Yes.
All right, good. All right, that's all coming up today. Yeah, folks, I'm telling you, you know, you need a philosophy. You need to be selfish. You need to really want what life has to offer. And this needs to be predominantly present in the culture in order for people to take on problems like these union thugs. You ever see Fist? Final question. The movie Fist with Stallone?
No.
Oh, really? I thought it's like one of these classics. I caught it on TV once, or at least the first half of it. You know, it's like in, you know, every New York, I guess, an Italian community, Polish, whatever, a bunch of immigrants in the early 20th century. And Stallone joins the union without really knowing what that is. And then he starts introducing himself as like, hey, I'm whatever my name is, from the union. Like that's his introduction to people. And at one point, they've got their union leader, like the big shot of the union, speaking to them at a group, you know, a congregation. He's in town and he's at an assembly, and he says, I want to talk to you about a problem we've been having here, which is Bolsheviks walking around, these men in suits, these Bolsheviks going around trying to turn you against the system. Guys, we are not here to be anti-business. We need these companies to make a profit. And he starts getting booed by the audience. So I think the movie Fist, at least at that point of the movie, was trying to make the point that the union did have a noble cause, but like so many movements, the mob, the sort of the excited crowd, they got too emotional and greedy that they lost sight of that, and they just wanted too much too fast, and ended up, you know, and the Bolsheviks, you know, influenced them. So yeah,
and nobody takes advantage of pathotypes in crowds better than a Bolshevik. They know exactly how to energize those people to maximum effect, to cause the most amount of chaos, to advance their agenda the furthest. And the labor movement was a big part of that.
All right. Yeah. And then final super chat, Jeff with $5 Canadian says, how is the new HR Pro Act 2021 going to affect businesses who don't want to employ unions? Do you know what that is, Mark?
No.
All right. Well, neither do I. Thank you, Jeff. And we're sorry we couldn't help. But that's all the time we have today. We'll jump over to Clubhouse for a little bit and hope to see you guys there. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all.
Nice.
And goodbye.
Bye-bye.